So if you would, thanks, Craig. So the reason we chose this date, for two reasons, it ends up. One, this is right after her first yard site. She actually died November 14th of 21. And her birthday was November 12th. I won't give the date because she never wanted the date. She never wanted her age publicized. Even at her funeral, nobody mentioned her year of birth. I don't know that anyone knew at the time, but I now have a copy of her passport, and it does have her birthday, so I'm not revealing it. So there are a couple of things I wanted to start with, and then we'll look at some texts about what is a moreh or morah, what that whole idea within Judaism, because we called her Hamorah. She was called Mora Shula. That's what everybody called her. We all remember that. Now, in those days, we also called Malka Mora Malka. It was very common to do that. But when we dedicated, if you look at the outside wall, the Jerusalem wall that basically guards our facility, there are the Revos, hello, that guards our facility. If you look at the inside where the Palm Plaza is, just as you're going out the door, the gate, on the right, you'll see a dedication to Shula. It's a mosaic that we had created for her and installed, and when we honored her, we dedicated it, and it's called Hamorah, the teacher. And if you look at it, it has the 7 species from indicating the land of Israel, and it has a river flowing through with Hebrew letters, because the Torah is like a meandering river, and that was the core. Those were 2 of the core things for Shula. One was Israel, and the other was Hebrew and the Torah, and also her as a teacher, Hamorah. I think, in a real sense, it's hard to define most people by one word, but I think with Shula that defines her. Hamorah, that's what she was. She, we know she never married and she never had children of her own. She lived alone, very alone, in Tower 41 by her own choosing. Her neighbors tried to invite her into their homes. She was unwilling. She also did not bring them into her home. Her community was really at the shuls she went to and at Beth Shalom. And even there, she was somewhat of an kind of an enigma. Knowing who her history, her bio, we only know little bits and pieces about her. Even her friends and neighbors didn't know a lot of stories to tell about her at her funeral. But they did talk about, and the fact that she died alone. And the reason they found her was that she hadn't shown up to breakfast or to minyan. And so some of the people who saw her there regularly worried about her, and they checked with the Tower 41 management, and they sent someone up, and they went into her room and found her in her room. And again, that was by her choosing. It's not, Alice, as many of you, as most, I think all of you know, really went out of her way to stay connected to Shula, bring her food, take her to medical appointments, try and help her. But even there, Shula was very reluctant to share her personal life or to even allow, much help in her life. It's part of the nature of who she was. She was incredibly stubborn. She was what we call an akshanit. That in Hebrew means it's like, the epitome of stubbornness. She was that. In some ways, she was totally inflexible. And in some ways, she was very kind and open and willing, particularly with students who needed her. Students who weren't, easily, did not take to Hebrew easily. She found ways to reach them. She didn't want to lose any student. She would really, really do it everything she could to get a student to be the best they could be on that day. It was all about them being really wonderful young Jews and stars in their own right, to have that moment in their lives, even if they were not academically gifted, or if they had issues, mental issues, physical issues. She would find ways to help them. And yet, in her own way of approaching life, she was absolutely rigid, which accounted for the kind of tragedies at the end I think, from my standpoint and Beth Shalom's standpoint, that we didn't have her with us until she died. She cut us off, and would not compromise on what her role would be at Beth Shalom at the end, even though we tried very hard to get her to teach Torah, to teach adults, to teach adult study, to teach adult B'nai Mitzvah. She just would not. She was either going to teach the kids or nothing. And that typified her throughout her life in many ways. And she became more and more of that as time went on. So let's say what we can say about Shula, about where she came from. So she was born in Aden, which is now a part of Yemen. When she was born there, whatever year that was, it was under British mandate, was under British control. At a certain point, Aden was actually a part of British India. And then it became a protectorate, a colony of the British Crown. And it was called that, British Crown colony. And therefore, Shula was actually on her passport a British subject and a citizen of the United Kingdom and colonies. When in her passport, when she entered England, it says that the country of residence for her was Israel. So obviously at some point, her family, we don't know when, went to Palestine or Israel. Again, we don't know exactly when she got to Israel. She was young at the time. She was fluent in Hebrew, so somewhat she must have been educated in Israel. Oh, here's one of her students. Hi, Julie. And so she came from Aden with her family to Israel. In Israel, we know that she had great admiration for her father. I don't remember her speaking a lot about her mother, but I remember her speaking very, very lovingly and in an honorable way about her father as a Torah scholar and a man who loved the Torah. And that was very important to her, and it carried throughout her life. So she then entered England and became a preschool teacher in England. And I want to share with you a couple of pictures from that will make you feel really good. This is her picture when she entered England. Does that look like Shula? You see her there? And then these were her classes. There she is. In England, her preschool classes. See all those little preschoolers all dressed up, very British. Little boys with their ties and bow ties. Little girls with their dresses. And it looks like they were having maybe Shavuot with little baskets to give their first fruits. Right? You can see all that. And you see Shula at that time. And then this was at Beth Shalom. Some of you may remember, you see Sue Miller and Shirley Miller on the right.
Arlene Albin.
Arlene Albin.
Third from the left.
Third from the left. Oh yeah, there she is. Anybody recognize anybody else there? Other than
Date this picture.
Theodore Herzl.
We recognize Theodore Herzl.
Oh, Theodore Herzl. Yeah. Oh, and some other Zionists up there too. One of them is Jabotinsky, which also is Shula. She was very much a right winger about Israel. Even before Begin, she already was very strongly right wing and believed in Israel's strength. And then this is more the Shula that some of you remember. Here she is signing a ketubah. I don't know whose that is.
How long was she at Beth Shalom?
Well, okay, so let's stop share for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So we know, I have documents. These are all from, I think, Tamara Nixon. When we honored Shula, she put together this packet, and it ended up on my desk when we were putting together the exhibit that's in the temple now. Oh, there's Karen Fried. Hi. And Debbie. Hi. So when she came to South Florida, it apparently was right after 67, somewhere in after the war or before the war. We don't know exactly. But she started taking, there was a Biyad Halashon training that was given to certified teachers for teaching in the Hebrew schools and in the schools.
Over 50 years.
And I have here her certificates from December 1967, April 1968. She took classes in 68, 69, 70, and various different classes, and was certified to teach. So the only name there is Temple Menorah, which would have made sense because Abramowitz was such a devoted Zionist, and the Hebrew was very important there. But obviously, early on, she ended up coming as well to Beth Shalom. We know she taught Ulpan, and that was at Federation. She also taught a number of different classes. She taught in preschool at Beth Shalom. She taught Hebrew in preschool and Jewish studies. And gradually, she also then taught in the Hebrew school. And eventually, as we know, she became the Menahelet, the supervisor of the Hebrew school. And then she became the director of the Bar and Bat Mitzvah program, but that already was later. It was an evolutionary process at Beth Shalom. Kenner Converser was not willing to let Shula on the Bima during his tenure. So she did not stand next to the Bar and Bat Mitzvah students. Most of us remember her being up there right with them and during that period and making sure they got through it. He was not willing to do that. He also did not let every student teach Torah, chant Torah. They all did Haftarah under him, but only select few who had good voices were allowed to do Torah, and he chose who they would be, and then they learned Torah.
unless I hold it.
Also, so then after I came, we started having Shula come up there. Gradually, she took over the program, and we moved the Hebrew school away from her and had directors of the Hebrew school separately, and particularly because we had quite a few B'nai Mitzvah in those days. We were running somewhere around 60 and 70
Wow.
at that time. And so it was, it was really full time. She didn't tutor everyone all the way through, but she was there for most of the kids all the way at the end, all the way through. And more Malka and other tutors, helped along the way and were there. But she was really, at that point, she became the program. And unfortunately, that we get back to that issue of her stubbornness and her rigidity. Again, she was so flexible with her students, but became more and more rigid over time about the way she approached the class. And our members, our younger members, changed, and they were no longer willing to do whatever Shula said. It became more of a battle to keep the parents as a part of Beth Shalom, and the kids were not responding, all of them in the same way. For those parents who bought into Shula, they bought in 100%, and they stood outside the classroom and they shook in their boots until Shula released the kids. They would not go in. They would not go into that classroom and say, but my child has to do their homework, or my child, because Shula didn't abide by the clock. If she was teaching and it was over 6:30 or whatever the time was, she kept them. And the carpool outside got angry, but it didn't matter. When Shula released them, she released them. I remember Rabbi Pomerantz, when one of her kids was in there, maybe more than one, she came to me and said, would you go in and get my child? Because Shula will listen to you. And the reason Shula listened to me was, I think, and this is what I said about her father, she had this real love and admiration for her father. She transferred that to Rabbi Kronish. He became that man in her life. She had Shabbat there virtually every week. She was a part of his family. He was her father substitute, and she was devoted to him. But she also was devoted to the honoring of the rabbi. And when I became the rabbi, it was not who I was, but I took that title. And once I had that title, she treated me in that way. I don't think she had the same respect for me she had for Rabbi Kronish or her father, but she had respect for my title as the rabbi of Temple Beth Shalom. And that was enough. And so when I asked her to do something, she would do it. That wasn't true of anyone else, including the other rabbis at Beth Shalom. It would have been interesting had she lived and continued on when Rabbi Pomerantz became the rabbi, whether she would have transferred that to a woman. I don't think so, but it's nothing we'll ever know. It's because she was raised in a Mizrahi environment, very male-oriented, patriarchal kind of a family, and that is where she felt most comfortable. After she left us, when she went to a shul, it was to an Orthodox shul. She went to Orthodox minions, and she felt comfortable behind the mechitza and in that environment. She still was a teacher of Torah and did some teaching even in the Orthodox shul she was part of. but for her, she had kind of, as she became older, once she became director of Bar and Bat Mitzvah, she saw herself only in that role because she was the original teacher who taught our Temple Beth Shalom's first adult B'no Mitzvah class. Tamara Nixon was in that class. It was Judy Chesler. There were a group of 5 women who were in that class. And that was at least, I don't know how long ago, but it was at least 15 years before I came. She taught them, but she did not teach the adult B'nai Mitzvah once I was there, and after that. She would help and she would consult, but she did not take that role. Once she took the kids, they became her world. And many of you know, when you sent her an invitation to your child's bar bat mitzvah, she kept that on the wall and kept it in a box after. She kept their pictures. She kept the kippot you made if you had the name in the kippah. After she died, they brought over to us a lot of this stuff. I mean, she didn't keep things very well. So they were in bad shape. They were moldy and stuff. But she kept them. She kept them all. Every picture, every tchotchke you gave at a bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah reception that she took home, she kept. Those kids, your children, our children, they were hers. And that was her family. Really, those were her life. And once she could no longer do that, and that was our decision as a temple. And it was a decision we made with heavy hearts, but we made it for the good of the temple because the new members had been already resistant to her, were not willing to take her program. I remember at our son Avi's bar mitzvah, and in those days, she taught the kids 7 aliyot. Some of you may have, I don't know if any of your kids had 7 aliyot, but our kids did. And I know she pushed any kid that had any ability to do it to their limit. Mm-hmm. And so, I remember Avi did like over 30 sukkim and the haftarah, which was the entire haftarah, which is enormous. And she did that for a number of kids who were talented in Hebrew that could do that. But for a kid that wasn't fluent in Hebrew, she would get the best she could out of them, and they would shine, even if it was 3 aliyahs, and she had to cut them back. She made sure that whatever Hebrew they did, it sounded like they were fluent in Hebrew. That was her love of her students, but also her love of Torah, because she didn't just teach Hebrew. She would find verses in the Torah portion. She didn't do what we do today, which is we start at the beginning and we do 3 aliyot or whatever we do, right? And maybe a maftir at the end. What she would do is find the best verses that applied to that child, and she would carve out their aliyot in the middle of the portion. If it had to be, she would piece together verses and teach it to the kids, and then we would do that for the bar bat mitzvah. And they did it out of the Torah, and they always were, and she rehearsed with them, and she would put in as much rehearsal as she had to. At certain points, kids would leave school for the last week before their bar bat mitzvah, some of the kids, and lived at Beth Shalom. Literally were there day and night with her. But she was there with them. You think about a teacher. What does that mean for someone to be so committed? On the other hand, you might say, well, this is a big meshugana to do that. But she was so committed to those children and wanted them to shine that she would give whatever she had to give for them. And as we've seen, our constituency, the Jewish community, has changed. And they are not willing, and we're not willing, they were not willing to live with that any longer. And we had to find a way to translate what she could do into what maybe would work at Temple, but she was not willing to do that. We know about Shula a few things in her life. We know that she was engaged to be married, and we know that the marriage never took place. I know no more about that. I only know that. I know that she was a size 3 when she was engaged, because she told me that. I know that. I don't think that was a Chico size 3. I think that was the old size 3, which was pretty small. On her passport, it says she was 5 feet tall. She wasn't 5 feet at the end. We know that. I know that her nephew came to live with her and died in a car accident on Biscayne Boulevard near the Federation building. And Shula used to drive.
Yeah, she's
When he died, she gave up driving.
Yeah.
Sold her car and never drove again. Again, that's kind of a rigidity about her, the way she saw things very much in black and white, in that way. From then on, she depended on other people. She walked, even when she couldn't walk anymore, barely could walk with a cane. She, as much as I know Alice is on now, Alice tried to help get her transportation, and she would make her own way. She wanted still to go to the shul and walk to the places and the market, and even when it was hard for her. It was the strength that she had that also translated into stubbornness. Any comments or any stories, anything you want to share before I share some text? Any memories? Yeah, Karen, unmute Karen. Karen Fried, yeah. Can you, can you unmute? I'll try.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Can
we
you
got
hear
you
me?
now. Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that, so my son Alexander, total rascal. She really made him into a man. She really, that was a real bar mitzvah. And I remember sorry, I dropped my earpiece. I remember their particular class was really rambunctious and quite naughty, and she was just extraordinary, and my kids adored her. And so Alexander was not a good student. He wasn't doing good in school, and I didn't know when it was his bar mitzvah. You know how all the parents wanted to book a date, and I did Martin Luther King because it also went with my heart and what our family represented. And I did not know the difference that would be the Song of the Sea, and that he had the whole thing while other kids had a page and a half. So he just did it, and for the rest of time until I didn't see Shula anymore, she would tell me that Eliezer, only 3 people in my 45 years have done that. So we would always think he's just fooling around in school, because obviously he can do this. But anyway, I have tremendous memories, and we have Orthodox families, so I totally get her. I also get Rabbi Glickstein, the temple decisions, but they're just the best memories. And the other thing is that even when Shula had her bad knees and all that, like, she really loved to dance at all the events, which is so cute.
Yeah, she did.
We miss her. We really missed her.
Mora Malka, do you want to say something, Mora Malka?
Yes. Well, I don't know. Yeah, here, wait, let me. Well, I have the best memories of Mora Shula. I always used to tell her she's the neshama of Temple Bet Shalom. She was my mentor. I remember I used to go as a mommy just to help her in Nitzanim. And one day she told me, I want you to come and help me. I said, well, but I will be there only until Hanukkah. And then Hanukkah came, and then Purim came. And 37 years after, I was still there with Shula. And the first year, I used to go very early and sit with her, and she will talk to me, and I will take notes and take notes. And that's how she made me into Mora Malka, really. I have, again, the best memories of Mora Shula. I'm very grateful to her.
Yeah, thank you, Malka. Anyone else want to share anything? Okay, so let's look for a second at a text or two about what the notion of more, in Hebrew, Mora and Moreh are spelled exactly the same way, right? So if you see it without vowels, which is the way Hebrew is written, it looks the same. It's just a question of whether it's a woman or a man that's being referred to. So Hamoreh is the man, the male teacher, and Hamorah is the female teacher. But it's the same exact Hebrew. So let's see what happened to my, here it is. So I put together a couple of things. This is from a dictionary of the Bible. And you can see that the root of Hebrew, because Shula would have taught you this, that the root of the word morah is yud resh he. In Hebrew, every verb, every classical verb has 3 Hebrew letters at their root, and that's the root. And the first meaning of it is to throw or shoot, right? To throw or shoot. But I also want you to see that over here, these are the derivations, the various Hebrew words, ancient languages that have similar roots. And one of them is to teach, right? So in Hebrew, it seemed to mean to throw or to shoot. And that's the first meaning. Then on the third meaning, it is even to throw or rain, to point something out. And then the 5th meaning in the Bible is to direct, teach, or instruct. And there is the word that's derived from it, morah or moreh, which is teacher. And some of you may remember in the Torah portion we just did, not 2 weeks ago, where Abraham has had his circumcision, and he is sitting under Elonei Moreh, the terebinths of Moreh. And those terebinths are trees, and that's a teacher's tree. Why is it a teacher's tree? Because people like Deborah, and other judges, teachers, sat under the main tree in town, and they taught at that tree, and that became a holy area originally. Now, these meanings here are from the modern Hebrew. So look at one of the meanings of the same root, parent, right? Do you see it? Horah or horeh. It's the same root. So a teacher, a parent, it also means to have been ordered to be there, to be ordered. It also means lore, and that's Torah. So Torah, Morah, Horah, all come from the same root, which is to throw or shoot. So we'd say to hit the mark, to shoot an arrow and to hit the mark. And that's why Torah means all of these things. Torah, the 5 books, the Mosaic laws, Jewish biblical rabbinic literature. It means theory, dogma, doctrine, to instruct, to command, to order, to indicate, to point out. So if you look at that derivation, right, what does that say to you about the way we understand that notion of being a morah or a moreh? What does that mean? Or maybe I could ask you, what does it mean to be a parent now that you know the Hebrew word?
A teacher in a way also.
Yes. No, it's exactly what it is, right? To be a guide, as Joni said, to be a teacher, to who are you trying to guide and where are you trying to guide them?
Yeah,
Right?
she didn't have her own children, but she was a parent to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
Right. She was what we call an Aim Yisrael. She was a mother for Israel who didn't necessarily have her own children, but she was like a mother in the sense of same way that our tradition says a parent is a teacher, and they are all connected to Torah, because Torah is about how do you guide a child to hit the mark. Now, I don't know what that mark is. That's the hard part, because the problem is many parents believe they know what the bullseye looks like, and they try to guide their child to that bullseye. Shula, I think, was flexible about the bullseye, or she was willing to guide them to the outer circle of the bullseye and not necessarily the center when she saw that that was what the child could do well. I think sometimes as parents, we get real rigid about what we think our child should do and where they should go, and try and push them there. The Jewish tradition is more, as we'll see in a second, to find what the child needs and then to go there. There it is. Okay. So look what it says in Proverbs. Educate a child according to their own path, and even when they grow old, they will not depart from it. Educate a child according to their own path. Now, normally the one from Proverbs that people like to quote is spare the rod and spoil the child. I think that's a better quote, right? Educate a child on their own path. And that really was what Shula tried to do. She tried to take a child and see what was in them and bring it out. And as Karen pointed out, she did that with a lot of different children. I want to read a couple of lines. When we honored Shula and put up that mosaic, Tamara Nixon asked her 4 children, who all studied under Shula, and Tamara was in that first adult bat mitzvah class, to write something to her. And she sent me copies of it. I want to read a couple of lines from what she wrote. Tamara wrote, "Teaching is a gift. There is no one who is more deserving of the title master teacher than you, Shula. You combine gentle encouragement, scholarship, discipline, a love of all things Jewish, a beautiful voice," and she had a lovely voice. Some of us remember when she chanted Haftarah, she would come in and deign to chant Haftarah on special occasions, "and a determination that each of your students will excel, no matter what their capabilities might be. You are patient and long-suffering with fussy parents and students who act up in class. You come early and stay late, and on the special day, you stand on our left hand as we chant from the Torah to aid us in case of stage fright or momentary forgetfulness." And then she also talked about her experience as an adult bat mitzvah. Her daughter, Victoria, said, I remember like it was yesterday sitting in the circle in your classroom, absorbing a love of the Hebrew language through a kind of magical osmosis. This was in preschool. Among my earliest memories of being in your classroom are singing, drawing, dancing, playing, and learning, singing Maim and dancing it, and Yesh Lanu Taish, and a song about a mischievous little rabbit, Hashafana Katan, who hopped away and caught a bad coal, Achi. She said, as she got older, you raised your expectations, and it was more serious study. She said, Shula's really tough, we'd say, but inwardly we were pleased because we knew you believed we were up to the challenge. You found us worthy. A line from Naomi, your continued patience, devotion, and stamina through the years continues to amaze me, not to mention your memory, that you remember all your students' Torah portions, and not just their Torah portions, but their Hebrew names. At each wedding she came to, she would say as they walked down the aisle, their Torah portion and their names in Hebrew. And she usually remembered the date of when it was. And Eleni, who was Tamara's granddaughter, Naomi's daughter, who she also tutored for her bat mitzvah, said, you are an incredible morah, someone I will always look up to as a wonderful role model. I had such a great experience. No one can do what you do, even remotely as well. You know, I think it's remarkable to have a teacher like that in your life. There are very few people that can say they had any that had that kind of devotion. She, you know, when they were under her, yeah, she was really tough, demanding, and parents felt that as well. And for a long time, our parents were willing to deal with it. But we do live in a different era, and we were moving that way. So let's look at one more text, because text was so important to her. I want to make sure so in Pirkei Avot, we have Yehoshua ben Parachia Nitai the Arbalite received the oral tradition from the pairs before them. Yehoshua ben Parachia used to say, appoint for yourself a teacher, and acquire for yourself a companion, and judge all people with the scale weighted in their favor. I think that was Shula. The only thing she didn't have a companion. She had a good friend, Neely Falik, was taught with her early on and remained a friend of hers. And I think she had a couple of other friends, but she was very closed about sharing those with us. But she had a teacher, and her teacher was her father. She had a teacher was Rabbi Kronish in America. And she judged all of her students in their favor. Now, in the Talmud, it says, this is what Rabbi Hanina said, I have learned much from my teachers and even more from my friends, but from my students, I have learned more than from all of them. She used to quote that text because, you know, she was born in Aden. She grew up in Israel. She went to England. She came here as a foreigner. She spoke English, but she didn't know American culture, and she had to think of the 1960s and 70s. Think of the students of those years. Remember the picture I showed you of her class in England? Think of what England was in those days and the difference in the communities. And this was South Florida. You know, this was casual. This was glitzy. This was so outside her experience. And she had to find a way to adapt to the students here and learn about them and grow and find ways to reach them. And I know that it took her time to do it, but I know she found a way gradually to learn and accept the way students were here, which was very different than what she had experienced growing up. Any comments or anything you want to add at this point? Yes, Mark.
Well, we're all still learning. I certainly am. And I came across in the morning Shakrid service, the Rabbi's Kaddish.
Right.
And
Kaddish to Rabbanan.
Yeah, and this beautiful prayer. I wondered, it struck me that it's beautiful to say in Shula's memory. I was also curious if, since it's something you say every morning, whether she actually said it. But it's the Kaddish. There are all these different Kaddish we know. And this one is the first one, and it says it's the most important. The Rabbi's Kaddish is a prayer for the teachers of Torah and their disciples. It's characteristic of Judaism's value system that this is the first Kaddish we say each morning. Judaism is a faith whose passion is education, whose heroes are teachers, and whose citadels are schools and houses of study. And the prayer says, All Yisrael, V'al Rabbanan, V'al Tamidechon, V'al Kol Tamidei Talmidechon. It says to Israel, to the teachers, their disciples and their disciples' disciples, to all who engage in the study of Torah in this place or elsewhere, may there come to them, Shula, and you, great peace, grace, kindness, compassion, long life, ample sustenance and deliverance from God in heaven. And we say, Amen.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, that original Kaddish, that Kaddish de Rabbanan, is in Aramaic, as we know all the other Kaddishes are, and it was part of the study hall, we believe, in Babylonia, when they would study the text at the end of a day, either at the end of a day, we don't know if that was the origin, or at the end of a section, they would say the Kaddish de Rabbanan. And eventually at the end of each day, they definitely said it. And then when their teacher died, they went to the grave and they said it there because they were now the disciples, right? Because the teacher had died. And then that became the Kaddish, what we call Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish. So it evolved really from, because the Kaddish, as we know, doesn't mention death. It's not about death. It's thanking God. It's saying, praise be God, God's great name. Because what? Because we learned so much. Because we just have this wonderful session and we learned so much. And so we praise God. That's the Kaddish de Rabbanan. And then we praise God for having had that teacher. And that became Kaddish. And then we praise God for having people in our lives who are our parents, who are Horim, from Yud Resh He, Torah, Mora, right? Hora. From all of those, we thank and praise God for our teachers who are our parents. Then and all of this evolution of the Kaddish comes from study and from saying it. And at the end of every, when you get to the end of a Masechta, of a section of Talmud, you say the Kaddish de Rabbanan to this day. It's listed in classical texts. It's listed there. It's something that is said. It's still said at the end of different portions. But when they put together the Sidur, the prayer book, and that's what you referred to, Mark, the first in the morning, in the morning prayer book, it says, we say the bracha for study, right? We do this in our morning minyan. We say at the end of the the blessings of the morning, right? Birkot HaShachar. The last one is the blessing for studying Torah. Those who come to Minyan know we say it together. Then we do a study. Al Shlosha Devarim, Ha'olam, right? Elu Devarim she'ein lahem shiur. Elu Devarim she'ein lahem shiur, right? That is from the Mishnah. So we study. Then the next thing we should have after that, which we don't do, is the Kaddish D'Rabbanan. Because we've just studied, said a blessing, studied. Now we say the Kaddish D'Rabbanan. Then we go on with the rest of, then we do the Psalms, Pesukei de Zimra, then we get into the prayer service. So that's why it's the first. But it all derives from teachers and from the idea of teaching. And I want you to imagine, and it's really important to understand how much we honor teachers as a tradition. I don't know that we do it as much today as we should, but in our tradition, you're not allowed to live in a town that doesn't have a teacher. You're not allowed. If there's no teacher in that town, the community has to bring one in and pay for one. You can't live there without one. And all of this came out of our idea that we would have universal education for all of our boys. And that took place about 2,000 years ago. Now, the Christian world was almost totally illiterate until the printing press, with very few exceptions. But the Jewish world was literate 1,500 years before that among the men. And many women, many girls became literate because they were in the family while their brothers were studying. And they were smart girls and they learned. And we know that because we have evidence of that there were girls learning Torah as well. But that notion of it being so valuable, it says that if you live in a distant place, like on a farm, you have to hire a teacher to bring in to teach your child, your son. It's one of your responsibilities as a parent. You have to teach them a profession, some way to earn a living. You have to make them literate. You have to get them married. Doesn't work so well for us. They have to deal with that themselves. They're not going to listen to us. But in those days, they did, apparently. And you're supposed to teach them to swim. You know why they had to teach them to swim? Well, the worst housing was by the river because it flooded. And that's where the ghettos were situated eventually. And that's where they pushed the Jewish community, to the river. And so it was a self-defense mechanism. If you needed to escape from where Jews lived, you had to swim out. Some Jews have argued, by the way, that in our day and age, that's the equivalent of that is teaching your child to use a gun, which actually has not been, the Jewish community has not bought into that. But in Israel, I think we've been proud of the fact that that's in fact what they teach their children, right? They teach them how to use weapons and how to defend themselves physically. And we in diaspora have not bought into that. And I didn't buy into it. We didn't buy into it in our family, but I have to tell you, I don't know, might have missed the mark as a community. I don't know. It has certainly served Israel well. And we live in difficult times with hundreds of millions of weapons all around us. I don't know. However, this is a tribute to Shula. And Shula did believe in self-defense, and she did believe in a muscular Judaism, and she believed in Menachem Begin's approach and Jabotinsky's approach, and she would have supported Bibi in the election, and I hope she wouldn't have supported Ben Gvir or Smotrich, but that she was a settler in her heart from a political standpoint. She never pushed that on anybody, but that's where her heart was in Israel. And we had a number of discussions in our staff meetings where periodically something would come up about Israel. And we knew where Shula would say it, it wasn't the consensus around the table, but Shula didn't care. It's where she was. Any last comments before we finish? Yes, Karen.
Okay, so you've heard this before. Wait, let me get it. Some of you have heard this, but I've kept this on my phone for it'll be 7 years in 2 weeks. Okay, so see if you can hear.
Wait, so let me get her picture up.
Okay,
See if I can get her picture up here. Oh, I've lost her picture.
hopefully you can hear this. Okay.
So I'm sure we'll hear it. I can't get her picture right now. So go ahead.
Okay, so let's see if I can get it so you can hear it. Wait.
Hi, this is Shula. This is just a quick reminder of Jessica's bat mitzvah. It's Vayikaz. So let's remember the good when she stood at the bima and decided her Torah and her Haftarah. Now God children all the best.
Could you hear that?
Couldn't understand it, but we heard it.
Yeah, I've kept it on my phone. I'm sure many of you got
You
these
can
phone
read it.
calls.
You can read
But
it.
she called to this was 7 years ago, and Jessica's bat mitzvah was 2001, so 21 years ago. So she called like 16 years after her bat mitzvah to remind us of her Torah portion, that it was coming up. And I kept the voicemail, and I'm so happy I kept it to hear her voice.
That's wonderful.
But she probably did that for thousands of children, so it's a nice reminder of her. And I'm so happy that you did this tonight. It just I'm sure for everybody else on this call, it just makes your heart very full to think that she was with us, and even in her challenging time, she was a really unique person.
Yes, she was.
You just painted this really amazing picture that we all can come away and say, wow, it was wonderful that we knew her.
Yeah, it's one of the heartaches in my life that I was separated from her for
Could
those years.
I say something?
Of course, Alice.
Karen, every Friday she would, of course, I always called her on Shabbat. And every Friday she would tell me whose anniversary of their bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah it was. And she always told me when the Revo girls, it was their Torah portion. And she always said, if you see Karen and Mark, tell them.
Oh, that's so sweet. But she, thousands of children, my God, just to have that impact is such a gift. Alice, you were so amazing to her. I just can't believe your goodness with her.
Well, while I have everybody on the phone, Rabbi, I'll send you all the information, but a week from Sunday is her yard site, her Hebrew yard site. And she asked if I could get a minyan to go and say Kaddish at her grave. So of course she doesn't include me in the minyan, or Malka, her niece who's coming. But Rabbi, do you think that we could get like 8 men to go over there?
Yeah, you showing December 4th?
December 4th at 11 o'clock at Mount Sinai
at 137th
Yeah,
Street
yeah, I was there because I was there for the funeral.
for the funeral, right? I'll bet
Um,
we could get Steve Greenspan.
Give me a time, Alice. What do you want to do? 11?
It's at 11, yeah.
Okay, and so anyone from Tower 41 coming over?
I don't know. I'll talk to Malka. That's her niece, Malka Ritterman. I'll talk to her and find out how many they have. But I
Okay,
thought maybe Mark Baranek would go over, and I know Steve came to the funeral and the burial.
right.
So
Yeah, I'll talk to Mark as well and to Rabbi Davis, and we'll see if we can round up some people. I have it down. I'll come.
okay, great. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry, Malka and I were serving at Chapman tonight when I realized that tonight was the night you were speaking. So as soon as we got in the car, I put it on, but I couldn't get it to go on the sound system of my car. I don't know why.
I
So
can't help
I'm
you
going to
with
go
that.
back
Maybe Craig could
home.
probably help you with that. All
Yeah.
right. So I hope.
Okay, I'm glad that you were recording this because I'm going to go back and watch it.
Good. You'll enjoy it.
Thank you very much. This was wonderful.
Thank you. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Enjoy,
You too.
and
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Thank
bye-bye.
you.
Bye
Rabbi.
bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank
Happy
you.
Thanksgiving.
Enjoy
Thanks,
everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.
Irish Legacy.
Bye-bye.